Going to switch things up just a tiny bit here, and I am going to introduce to you the, how do I say it, Mrs. Reverend Dr. Susan Ritchie, to update us on the work of the Renewing the Covenant Task Force. So on October 15th of 2015, moderator Jim Key called for the board to consider how we might imagine moving the UUA from the notion of membership to covenant. Jim Key proposed the task force to look into this question, and that task force has consisted of myself, Susan Ritchie, and I have Reverend David Miller and Reverend Bob Shade, and Kathy Burke has also been working with us, and we've also had Elizabeth Mount and Reverend David Ruffin work with us. So part of Jim's charge to us was this. He said, let's just imagine. Let's imagine if when coming into congregations, people don't just sign a membership book. What if instead they entered into a covenant that would be renewed periodically? He also asked us to imagine, what if it were the same for congregations in their relationship to the association? What if congregations came into covenant with each other one again that would be renewed periodically? Jim believed very much that this could provide much needed energy and direction for our movement. So we have indeed spent this past few years imagining these things, and we're here to tell you about our thinking and our progress, and we're also here to make a proposal for your consideration. And it is one that we truly believe can help move our associations and our congregations into a direction of greater mutual cooperation and accountability, and importantly, more enthusiasm for our shared work. So the first question we felt we had to answer, well, what is this covenant? And, how would it be periodically renewed? Well, we knew right away that we wanted the covenant to be something more than a set of rote words that we might periodically recite. I pledge to the allegiance, to the flag. No, we want something more living than that. We also knew that the covenant must be more than promises about how we treat each other, although it would include that. It must be an agreement between ourselves and something larger than ourselves. And we came to believe that this something larger, it's a compact between ourselves and the work we share. It's our mission, not our mission statement, but our mission. Along the way, we have been inspired by the work of the American Baptists. They engage in a process that they call the mission table. And the Baptists, of course, have the advantage of having a great simple clarity about their mission, to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. But we've learned a great deal about how they are with each other. And they have this vigorous and beautiful process for discerning how each of their entities in each of the collective world, how they can work together to fulfill collective mission. What they do is they sit at a mission table and they discuss their work and their challenges and their obstacles, their strengths and capabilities, and they align that work together. So upon reflection, the task force has come to understand that if we Unitarian Universalists are truly to covenant together, we might begin with theological reflection, broadly defined to include humanism and atheism and agnosticism, but theological reflection about what is the what and the why and the how of our shared work as a religious movement. After all, to covenant is to commit to that engagement, and it's about agreeing to be mutually accountable to what comes of it. We must renew our covenants periodically and continuously. So our response to Jim Key's invitation to imagine moving from the notion of membership to covenant is to imagine all Unitarian Universalists in all of our forms actively building mutual accountability and collective discernment of what Unitarian Universalism is called to do in this world, in this cultural moment, at this time. Covenanting is discerning together how we can be accountable to that mission. Sounds fairly basic, right? It is, right? People joining together, just agreeing on purpose and mission and being accountable to each other to fulfill it. And perhaps you're wondering, why would the task force think that this work isn't already happening? Our congregations have a lot of regular meetings. And we take so many votes here at General Assembly. After all, we elect our president and we elect our moderator. Well, we believe that elections and debates are insufficient for the discernment of mission that we believe we need. Unitarian Universalism, by some of these structures and processes, can sideline theological reflection, and we can keep mutual accountability to a minimal level. In this sense, we really are a membership organization. We have minimal expectations of each other. The result is too often a half-hearted religious movement. The way we do things, of course, it's rooted in so much of the past. The UUA itself is organized as a standard nonprofit enterprise, and if we go back further, the standard nonprofit organizational structure, the one that first evolved in the 19th century, that itself was a copy of the business corporation. And in terms of the Unitarians, it was specifically the copy of a New England small business corporation that saw virtue in consolidating power in a limited number of patrons. The 1825 establishment of the American Unitarian Association was a part of that milieu. And while there have been many changes over the years, the same core patterns of how we distribute power remain the same. Indeed, much of the structure of our UUA maintains the structure that was given to it by Samuel Atkins Elliott, who was president of the AUA from 1900 to 1925. Indeed, some people even call the UUA the house that Sam built. And what Elliott did was work deliberately to match the structure of the association to match business models, especially in terms of disempowering the Board of Trustees, because that's what successful banks, insurance companies, and mills do. I'm quoting directly. Of course, in doing so, he was bringing the American Unitarian Association even more in line with how wealthy New England families were used to operating their charities. Our structures, then, they reduce the structure, our discussion of mission and the work of the association, they reduce it to the business of the association. We need to discern together what the world needs from us and what we have to offer the world. If when we come together, we meet just as shareholders of a nonprofit corporation, if we hear only reports and elect pre-selected slates of candidates and line up at pro and con microphones for resolutions, what does all this do if it does not address the fundamental question of mission and our alignment around it? The way Indeed, our present structures, this way of relating, this way of talking together that we have developed, it only maintains the supremacy of white, middle class, upper class, and male elites within Unitarian Universalism. Your task force has come to the conclusion that if Unitarian Universalists are to fully covenant with each other, we are going to need a different way of being together. Fortunately, we actually have an example of this in our history. Did you know that it wasn't just that we used to have only general assemblies? We used to have general assemblies, but also something that we called general conferences. And the General Assembly was the place to do the business of the association, and it was the administrative body of this beautiful governance wing of Unitarian Universalism. But there was another wing to that body, which was the ecclesiastical body, which means that we actually had delegates attend a general conference as representations from their congregations, specifically to talk about theology and come together for the mutual strengthening of each other, the creation of relationships of aid and accountability, and for theological discernment. Do you believe that in 1961, when the Unitarians and the Universalists consolidated, we completely forgot the General Conference and in its stead placed only the General Assembly? And so, the task force is calling for a General Conference. Specifically, we imagine this to be that gathering where these discussions can be held, and we can imagine limiting the number of congregations and the organizations to a small number of delegates. We want meaningful conversations. We don't want too much outside of a few large questions. And we want to make sure, of course, that we actively engage youth, young adults, UUs of color, and historically underrepresented groups. So we welcome feedback from all Unitarian Universalists. We are currently seeking feedback from all the different identity and professional groups that we know of, and we're eager to hear what you have to say. We invite you to talk with us here at General Assembly, or if you need to, or can, to email your comments to sritchie, S-R-I-T-C-H-I-E, @uua.org. Okay, so here's our summary recommendation. So if for any reason you've been distracted, here's the core. The task force recommends that the UUA moderator call for a general conference of UUs as soon as possible and no later than the fall of 2018 for the purposes of exploring what the UUA is called to be in today's world. We further recommend that the UUA schedule general conferences on a regular basis, perhaps in biennial rotation with General Assembly business sessions. The task force believes it is time for these sort of deep reflection and consideration. The task force believes that the organization of the DNA of the UUA, that it is time to be reassessed, given the racist, sexist, and classist biases that are formed and which are reinforced by our structure, which actually preclude the full realization of our covenantal relationships. We so look forward, thank you. We so look forward to being in touch with you and finding new ways to be with you in the future.
It sounds so much a radical. That is some